Why did no one ever look her in the eye? Maybe it was the uniform, the dull gray jumpsuit that marked her as one of the invisible ones. Maybe it was because people like her weren't supposed to matter. They cleaned up after those who did. The hangar at Holloway Air Command was a cathedral of steel and echo. At 500 hours, it was nearly silent except for the hum of distant generators and the faint scrape of a mop bucket wheel against the floor. Aacia River moved between the shadows of aircraft like a ghost who had learned to walk in daylight. Her reflection flickered briefly in the cockpit glass of the XF-72 Harrier, the most advanced stealth prototype in the fleet, before disappearing again as she wiped the instrument panel clean. To everyone else, she was just the cleaner. She moved with a rhythm that was almost military, precise, methodical, practiced, but no one noticed. No one ever noticed. "Morning, Ghost," Lieutenant Thackeray's voice carried across the hangar, casual, dismissive, half amused. The nickname had stuck. She never answered when spoken to, so the pilots had decided she wasn't worth real conversation. To them, she was a rumor, a presence, a blur in the corner of their eyes. Aacia didn't respond. She just kept cleaning, her gloved hands gliding over the targeting system display, her eyes tracing its design with silent familiarity. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have seen how her fingers hesitated for half a second over the encrypted communications module, how her gaze sharpened, not like someone wiping fingerprints, but like someone reading code from memory. But no one paid attention to the cleaning staff. That was the rule of bases like Holloway. And that was why she was here. She moved down the ladder, her boots soundless on the metal rungs. Somewhere above, the ceiling lights buzzed faintly. Outside, dawn was beginning to melt the darkness into a soft blue haze. Her hand slipped briefly into her pocket. The corner of an old photograph brushed her fingertips, worn, faded, folded from years of being opened and closed. She didn't need to look at it. She could see it in her mind. 7 pilots in black flight suits, standing shoulder to shoulder on a desert runway. 6 of them were dead. The 7th was supposed to be. "Attention on deck!" The shout cracked through the quiet like a whip. Colonel Aacia Blackwood stormed into the hangar, trailed by 3 foreign officials in spotless uniforms. His boots struck the metal floor with a kind of authority that didn't need to be earned, only worn. "You there, cleaning staff," he barked without even glancing at her name tag. "Clear the aircraft immediately. These gentlemen need to inspect the cockpit." She was already gathering her supplies, careful, deliberate. "Today, please," he snapped. "Some of us have real work to do." The officials laughed politely, their laughter bouncing off the hangar walls and dying in the cold air. As Aacia stepped down from the cockpit ladder, one of the visitors turned abruptly and collided with her. The metal bucket tipped, spilling water and cleaning rags across the floor. Not one of them stopped. "Watch yourself," the man muttered as he stepped over her cloth. Aacia knelt to gather the supplies, head lowered. Her silence wasn't submission, it was calculation. Above her, Colonel Blackwood and his guests examined the cockpit she just cleaned, commenting on flight metrics and security upgrades. From below, Asha's eyes tracked every movement, every careless gesture, every name that passed between them. Invisible again, that was fine. Being invisible was her greatest weapon. By midday, the hangar was alive with noise, technicians shouting readings, pilots laughing, the hum of engines being tested. Aacia moved through it all like an afterthought, pushing her cart between aircraft, wiping down canopies and switches with the same calm rhythm. People had learned to speak freely around her. That was the thing about cleaners. They weren't human in the eyes of those who thought themselves important. They were scenery, furniture. And furniture never listened. She did. She listened to everything. That afternoon, as she was cleaning the operations center, a room filled with the low murmur of analysts and the glow of tactical screens, the base alarms shattered the monotony. Blaring urgent, real. Unidentified aircraft detected, someone shouted. Heading 047, altitude 22,000 and descending. Every officer in the room sprang into motion. Aacia stayed by her cart, cloth in hand, her eyes flicking up to the main radar screen. The formation was wrong. The pattern too deliberate, too familiar. Commander Blackwood stormed into the room, barking orders. Formation Delta 6, scramble interceptors now. A younger pilot hesitated. Sir, Delta 6 leaves our western corridor unguarded. I'm aware of basic tactical deployment, Captain, Blackwood snapped. Execute the order. Aacia bent down to pick up a folder that had slipped from a nearby desk. Classified markings stamped the top page. She glanced, just for a second, at the header before handing it back to its owner. The man, Major Lermer, gave her a look of irritation. That's above your clearance level. She nodded, silent, returning to her cart. Above, the radio channels crackled with pilot chatter. Hunter 1 to base, target executing vertical climb. Hunter 2, I've lost visual. That maneuver, it's not possible. Maintain formation, Blackwood barked. Force it east to Sector 4. But it didn't matter. Seconds later, the blip vanished from radar. Gone. Target lost, shouted the technician. Impossible, Blackwood hissed. Check for malfunctions. All systems nominal, sir. It just disappeared. Aacia's hands moved automatically over the console she was cleaning, but her thoughts were a storm. That maneuver, that flight pattern, she'd seen it before, years ago. Her heart beat once hard against her ribs. But she said nothing. Hours later, the officers' mess was filled with the low hum of conversation. Pilots gathered at tables, trading stories of the day's alert. Aacia cleaned the tables quietly, ignored as always. You see that turn, Lieutenant Farnsworth was saying. Inverted Cobra maneuver mid-climb. No one does that outside a simulator. Reminds me of Phantom Squadron, another said. Those legends during Operation Midnight Sun. The table fell quiet. Yeah, someone muttered. Commander River, they said she burned alive in that crash. Aacia's hand trembled just slightly as she wiped the table. Convenient how that investigation disappeared, another added. The woman was a ghost, Farnsworth said. Brilliant but reckless. The conversation blurred after that. Laughter, speculation, ignorance. Aacia's sleeve brushed against a chair as she turned, the fabric catching for an instant. When she freed it, the motion revealed a glimpse of something stitched beneath the inner lining, a patch. Black Hawk Starfield Arc. A symbol whispered about in hangar stories. Captain Abalona, sitting closest, caught sight of it. Her smile froze. Confusion flickered across her face, then realization. But by the time she looked again, the cleaner was gone. That night the base slept uneasy. Security lights painted long shadows across the tarmac. Aacia drove back to her small off-base apartment, a single lamp burning by the window. She entered quietly, locked the door, and pulled the curtains shut. Then she crossed to the closet. Behind a false panel, hidden beneath civilian clothes, was a compact encrypted transceiver, military grade. She powered it on, the screen flickering to life with silent green code. Her voice when she spoke was not the quiet murmur of the cleaner. It was controlled, calm, authoritative. Mockingbird to Nest, the package moves tonight. Blackwood confirmed involvement, requesting Phase 2 authorization. The reply came seconds later, crisp, mechanical. Authorization granted, extraction team standing by. Good hunting, Colonel. She powered down the device and stood before the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back wasn't invisible anymore. No cleaning uniform, no lowered eyes, no hesitation. The reflection was sharper now, military posture, the quiet steadiness of command. Colonel Aacia River. Officially dead. Still fighting. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the mirror, tracing the faint outline of a scar that ran beneath her jaw. A memory of fire, of falling metal, of screams over the radio. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow she would stop being a ghost. Outside, the night deepened. The base lights blinked across the valley like stars trying to remember their names. And in one small apartment, a woman who had spent 8 months pretending to be no one, prepared to become herself again. How do you prepare for war when no one even knows you're in it? By sunset, Holloway Air Command was alive again, floodlights cutting through the dark, the echo of boots over tarmac, the mechanical growl of aircraft being fueled and armed for night readiness drills. But for Aacia River, it wasn't preparation. It was prelude. The moment she'd been waiting for and dreading had arrived. She entered the hangar as she always did, gray uniform, cleaning cart, the faint scent of solvent and metal in the air. The guards barely looked at her. Security had been doubled after the morning's unidentified aircraft incident, but the cleaners, they walked through without question. No one suspected ghosts. "Evening Ghost," a young technician called, giving her a half-wave as she passed. "Make it quick tonight. Command wants all hands clear before midnight." She nodded, silent, and pushed her cart toward Hangar 7. The XF-72 waited under the harsh glow of overhead lights, sleek and predatory, its black frame reflecting faint orange from the maintenance lamps. Around it, teams of technicians moved like worker bees, connecting diagnostic lines, checking seals, updating systems. The air buzzed with tension disguised as routine. "Don't touch anything critical until the pilots arrive," a supervisor barked. Then, seeing her, softened. "Oh, it's just the cleaner. Go ahead, but make it quick." Just the cleaner. She climbed the ladder into the cockpit, her body moving from memory. Her gloved fingers brushed across the flight controls she'd once known like an extension of herself. 8 months pretending to wipe fingerprints. But every movement, every checklist, every control sequence, she remembered it all. The XF-72 was more than a plane. It was a secret buried under another secret, and Aacia was one of the few who truly understood it. Below, she could hear Blackwood's voice before she saw him, sharp, impatient, commanding. He entered with 2 aides, flight plans in hand, his presence tightening the air. Her watch ticked once, then again. 20 minutes. That's all the time she had before everything would ignite. She leaned slightly forward, pressing the corner of her cloth against the navigation panel. Beneath that smooth metal was something no engineer had listed in any maintenance report, a hidden compartment she'd helped design years before. Her fingertip found the recessed release latch, invisible to the untrained eye. Then, before she could open it, the hangar door slammed open. Colonel Blackwood stormed in. His eyes scanned the area, sharp, searching, until they landed on her in the cockpit. His jaw clenched. "What the hell are you doing in there?" The sound of his boots climbing the ladder echoed like a countdown. "This area is restricted during pre-flight," he snapped. "Get out now." Aacia didn't respond. She just kept cleaning, calm, deliberate. "I said out." He grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her up from the seat. The movement was sharp, angry, and in that motion her sleeve slipped back. For a moment, the overhead light caught something glinting on her forearm. A Black Hawk surrounded by stars. The insignia. Blackwood froze. His voice dropped hoarse. "Where did you get that?" Around them, technicians had stopped moving. Silence filled the hangar, electric, unreal. Aacia straightened, her body no longer the posture of a cleaner but of command. "You were told I burned in that crash," she said quietly. "Convenient story, wasn't it, Colonel Blackwood?" The color drained from his face, his grip loosened. "Colonel River," he whispered. Every head turned, every motion in the hangar stopped. The ghost had a name now. Asha's eyes met his, steady, cold. "You signed my death certificate." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, slowly, Captain Bologna, the only one who had glimpsed the patch earlier, stepped forward and snapped to attention. "Colonel on deck." The words broke the silence like thunder. Every officer in sight followed awkwardly, uncertainly, but instinctively. All except Blackwood. He couldn't move. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He'd spent months ignoring her, mocking her, using her invisibility as proof of his superiority. Now, he stood in front of the woman who had once commanded the most elite unit in the Air Force, and whose death had been forged to bury the truth. "This is impossible," he muttered. "I saw the wreckage." "You saw what you were meant to see," she replied, "just like everyone else." Then, to the stunned crowd, "This base is now under military intelligence investigation. Colonel Blackwood is under suspicion of treason, weapons trafficking, and conspiracy in connection with Operation Midnight Sun." The words hit like a detonation. Gasps, movement, murmurs. Blackwood's hand twitched toward his sidearm, instinct, fear, but she was faster. Her weapon appeared almost casually, drawn with the smooth precision of muscle memory. "I wouldn't," she said softly. His shoulders sagged. "Captain Bologna, Lieutenant Whitfield," she ordered. "Take him into custody." They hesitated, torn between confusion and duty. Now, they moved. Blackwood's eyes met hers one last time as they restrained him. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," he said, voice tight. "This goes higher than either of us." "I'm counting on it." As they led him away, the hangar came alive again, whispers, disbelief, adrenaline. But Acia's focus was sharp, her tone measured. "For those who don't know me," she said, "I am Colonel Aacia River, former commander of Phantom Squadron. For the past 3 years, I've operated under deep cover to expose a weapons smuggling ring inside our own ranks. Tonight, that operation ends." Her eyes swept across the faces in front of her, the same men who'd once looked past her. "You all thought I was invisible. That was the point. The most secure place to hide is in plain sight." The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was shame. And respect. The alert sirens blared before she could finish. "Multiple unidentified aircraft approaching from the north," shouted a technician. "They're using the same jamming signatures as the earlier contact." Acia turned instantly toward the command platform. "That'll be his extraction team," she said. "They're coming to retrieve Blackwood and the shipment he arranged for tonight." "Shipment?" Bologna asked. "Prototype targeting systems," Acia replied, already moving. "Designed to override standard flight controls. Whoever controls them controls any aircraft equipped with them." The implications rippled through the hangar like cold water. "Those aircraft are hostile," Acia continued. "This base is the target. Get every bird fueled and armed, now." For a moment, hesitation. No one wanted to move without an official order. Acia's voice cut through it like steel. "In case it's unclear, I am assuming command of Holloway Air Command, effective immediately." Her words carried weight, not just authority but conviction, and that was enough. Within seconds, the hangar exploded into motion. Pilots ran for their gear. Crews raced to prep interceptors. The calm efficiency of military instinct took over. Acia turned to Bologna. "Get me a flight suit." "Colonel, with respect." "I helped design the XF-72, she interrupted. "No one flies it better than me." Bologna nodded and sprinted off. In minutes, Acia stood at the edge of the hangar, now dressed in black flight gear, the same she'd worn 3 years ago, the same insignia restored to her chest. She took the helmet from Thackeray, who looked suddenly young, almost ashamed. I called you Ghost," he said quietly. A small smile ghosted across her lips. "Sometimes being a ghost is exactly what the mission needs, Lieutenant." She climbed into the cockpit, the same seat she'd polished, dusted, and wiped for 8 months, and this time she powered it up. The engines came alive like a heartbeat, returning after years of silence. "Mockingbird to nest," she said into the encrypted channel. "Cover is blown, Blackwood secured, hostiles inbound, engaging." "Copy Mockingbird," came the reply. "Authorization granted. Proceed with all necessary force." She closed the canopy. The world outside faded to static and steel. For the first time in years, she was home. The XF-72 tore through the night, its engines roaring across the valley, faster, quieter, deadlier than any conventional jet. Acia's hands danced across control like she'd never left the sky. "Phantom lead to squadron," she said, voice calm, almost steady. "Form on my wing. A Bologna high cover. Thackeray, you're on my 6. "Copy that, Colonel," came the responses, quick, firm, unhesitant now. On radar, 5 enemy aircraft approached from the north, unmarked, silent, weaving through jamming interference. "They're using black market stealth," Aacia said. "Same tech from Midnight Sun." "So it's true," a Bologna murmured. "It was always true." She angled her aircraft toward the enemy formation. "Mark my signal. We engage on Sierra 7. "Sierra 7, Thackeray asked. "That's not in the manual." "It's in mine." The formation tightened, Holloway's fighters locking into pattern behind her. Above the clouds, the enemy appeared, sleek shapes cutting through moonlight like shadows given wings. "Mark!" Acia's squadron broke apart in a split maneuver, baiting the hostiles into pursuit. 2 dove low, 1 climbed high. The trap closed in seconds, a perfect crossfire. 2 explosions painted the sky in orange fire. A third enemy plane spiraled, crippled. 2 down, 1 damaged, Aacia called. 2 still active, ground team incoming. Below, Holloway's lights flashed red as base defenses came alive. Inside, in the command center, guards surrounded Blackwood's cell. He smiled faintly as alarms wailed through the compound. "You think River being alive changes anything?" he sneered. "She's just painted a bigger target on herself." But even he looked unsettled when he heard the distant rumble of the XF-72 breaking formation above. A ghost had taken back the sky. Back in the cockpit, Acia's eyes were steady, her pulse unflinching. Every movement she made felt both new and familiar, as though 3 years of pain, betrayal, and silence had been distilled into this single flight. Her squadron regrouped, chasing the final 2 targets into the upper atmosphere. This wasn't revenge. It was closure. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. What does redemption cost when the ghosts you carry finally answer back? The sky above Holloway burned with streaks of light. Tracer fire arced through the darkness like falling stars, each one a silent promise of death. The XF-72 roared through it all, silent on radar, alive in her hands. Colonel Aacia River moved like she was born to fly, because she had been. The years of exile melted away in seconds. Every motion, every maneuver came from muscle memory forged in fire. "Phantom lead to base control," she called, her voice calm even as enemy missiles streaked past her canopy. 2 hostiles neutralized, 1 crippled, 2 remain. "Copy that," came the response, static-laced. "Ground infiltration possible, security teams deploying." The words hit her harder than the turbulence. Ground infiltration. That's what she'd been waiting for. The air battle was the distraction, the same tactic used during Operation Midnight Sun 3 years ago. A feint above, chaos below. The real mission was on the ground. "A Bologna, maintain air cover," Aacia ordered. "Protect the base perimeter, I'm going back." "Colonel, you can't." "I can and I will." Without another word, she cut her throttle and rolled the XF-72 into a vertical dive. The G-forces pressed against her chest, the aircraft screaming as it sliced through the cloud layers. Lightning flashed in the distance, painting her cockpit in stuttering bursts of white. Below, Holloway shimmered, floodlights blazing. alarms flashing red across the runway like veins of fire. Base control, this is Mockingbird. I'm returning to Holloway for ground intercept. Confirm enemy activity at Warehouse Sector 3. Confirmed, came the reply. 4 hostiles inside, they've breached containment. Warehouse 3, the shipment. Her heart pounded once, deep and steady. Copy, I'm setting down. The XF-72's engines shifted tone as she activated the vertical landing system, a whispering roar that scattered debris across the tarmac. The fighter descended like a dark angel through smoke and light, touching down near the eastern sector where the firefight had begun. As soon as the landing gear locked, she was moving. Helmet off, pistol drawn, boots hitting concrete. The night air was thick with the smell of jet fuel and gunpowder. She moved through the service tunnels, the same ones she'd walked every night pushing a mop cart. Every corner, every maintenance passage was etched into her memory. For months, she'd memorized this base not as a cleaner, but as a soldier mapping her battlefield. A corridor light flickered above her. Somewhere distant, automatic gunfire rattled the metal walls. Her radio crackled to life. Mockingbird, security has engaged hostiles near Warehouse 3. Major Lermer's unit is on-site assisting. Lermer. A flicker of instinct twisted her gut. Something didn't feel right. She reached the rear of the warehouse, a service entrance few ever used. The door was unlocked. She entered silently, slipping into the shadows behind stacked crates and cargo containers. Inside, voices echoed. Move faster, someone barked. Get those systems into the cases now. She peeked between crates. 4 men, tactical gear, moving with military precision. And one of them giving orders was Major Lermer. Her jaw tightened. So that was it. The betrayal had come from inside. She crouched lower, eyes scanning the scene. The crates bore the marks she'd seen in Blackwood's files. Tactical override systems, experimental. If these left the base, they could turn every Allied aircraft into a weapon for their enemies. Aacia adjusted her grip on her sidearm. 4 armed men, all professionals. The odds weren't in her favor, but then they never had been. Before she could move, her comm buzzed softly, a silent vibration against her wrist. A coded message from command. Blackwood neutralized during transport. Her eyes closed for half a second. So that was how it ended for him. Not in court, not in confession, just silence. For a moment, she wondered if justice and revenge ever looked that different in the dark. Then she exhaled low and steady, focus, mission first. She glanced toward the wall. A red handle marked fire alarm, emergency lockdown. Sometimes the simplest weapon was chaos. She reached for it and pulled. The warehouse exploded with noise. Sirens wailed. Steel shutters began to drop over every exit. What the? One of the men shouted, spinning toward the door. Lermer's head snapped around. Find the trigger, secure the crates. Too late. Aacia stepped from behind cover, gun raised. I wouldn't do that. Lermer froze. Recognition hit him like a slap. The ghost, he whispered. Then after a heartbeat his face hardened. No, Colonel River. Her tone was quiet, deadly calm. Drop your weapons. He smirked. 4 against 1, Colonel, you sure about that? You might want to recount, came another voice, firm, clear from the far entrance. Captain Bologna. She stepped into view, flanked by a full security squad. Their rifles trained on the conspirators. Lermer's confidence cracked. Your air support's gone, Bologna said. Your extraction's not coming, it's over. For a moment no one moved. Then Lermer exhaled sharply, dropping his weapon. The others followed. As security moved in to restrain them, Aacia stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. Why, she asked softly, you swore an oath. You served this flag for decades. Why trade it all for blood money? Lermer gave a short, bitter laugh. You really want to know? Because loyalty doesn't pay the bills, Colonel. Because I spent 25 years saluting people like Blackwood, men who got rich while I waited for a pension that wouldn't cover rent. He looked at her with something between resentment and exhaustion. These systems were worth millions. One shipment, and I could have finally had the life I earned. Aacia's gaze didn't waver. And how many lives would have paid for that life? How many pilots would have burned in their cockpits when their aircraft turned against them? He said nothing. The silence was answer enough. A Bologna gave the signal. The team moved in, securing the prisoners. As they were led away, Aacia holstered her weapon, exhaling slowly. Her pulse had steadied, but her mind hadn't. The firefight outside had ended. The air was still thick with the scent of ozone and metal. Through the high windows, dawn was beginning to creep into the sky. Hours later, the command building was a hive of motion. Intelligence officers in dark suits moved between rooms, carrying encrypted drives and sealed reports. Aacia stood in Blackwood's former office, now transformed into a temporary command post. The table before her was covered in surveillance photos, documents, and communication logs. Across from her, a senior intelligence official, older, gray-haired, deliberate. "Your operation gave us what we needed," he said. "Between Blackwood's files and Lermer's testimony, we can trace the smuggling ring straight up the chain. You've done more than anyone thought possible." Aacia nodded faintly. "6 of my pilots died when I exposed this once before. I couldn't let it happen again." The officer regarded her quietly. "You've spent 3 years in the shadows. What will you do now that you're back in the light?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the window, to the runways, to the silhouettes of aircraft lined like sentinels under the morning sky. Outside, personnel moved with renewed discipline. She could feel their glances when she passed now, not dismissive anymore, but different. Respect mixed with guilt. The same people who had once walked past her, without seeing her now, stood straighter when she entered a room. A Bologna approached, holding a digital tablet. "Colonel, the debrief reports are ready for transmission. Major Lermer's cooperation is already producing results. He's nomming contacts across 3 divisions." Aacia nodded. "Good. Make sure those names don't vanish into bureaucracy. This can't happen again." A Bologna hesitated, then added softly, "Ma'am, I served under you years ago, before Phantom Squadron. I didn't recognize you until last night. The way you looked at us as if we were all strangers." "I had to," Aacia said. "That's how you survive when the truth gets you killed." A Bologna looked down, then back up. "I owe you an apology." Aacia shook her head gently. "What you learn from this matters more than what you say about it." Outside, the first aircraft engines of the morning began to roar to life. The sound was like memory, the same thunder she'd lived with for years, the same that had haunted her sleep. She stepped onto the tarmac, her boots catching light from the rising sun. For months, this ground had been her cage. Now it felt like something else, something almost sacred. Lieutenant Thackeray approached awkwardly, holding something small in his hands. Her cleaner's ID badge. "I figured you might want this back," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, Colonel, I'm sorry." She took it from him, studying the faded plastic. Her picture stared back, expressionless, anonymous. The woman no one had noticed. "You know," she said softly, "this badge opened more doors than any clearance ever could." He gave a nervous laugh. She smiled faintly. "Don't forget that, Lieutenant. Sometimes the invisible ones see everything." He nodded, then saluted. Aacia slipped the badge into her pocket, beside the worn photograph she always carried, the one of her squadron, the 6 who never came home. She looked out over the base, the runways, the hangars, the horizon stretching endless and bright. A Bologna's voice came over the intercom. "Colonel River, your aircraft is prepped. Command requests confirmation of readiness for post-operation flight inspection." Aacia turned toward the XF-72, gleaming under the dawn, silent and waiting. She walked toward it slowly, deliberately. Every step felt like the closing of a chapter she hadn't realized was still open. She climbed into the cockpit one final time. Her fingers brushed the console, not to clean, not to hide, but simply to remember. Somewhere across the field, a young maintenance worker watched her from the shadows, unnoticed, half hidden behind a supply crate. Aacia caught his eye and gave the slightest nod. He blinked in surprise, because she understood. Once she had been him, unseen, underestimated, essential. The engine's hum deepened as she powered up the systems. The sun climbed higher. The light found her face through the canopy, soft, golden, almost forgiving. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Not as Mockingbird. Not as Phantom lead. Just as Aacia River, soldier, survivor, ghost reborn. And maybe that was enough. What happens when the ghosts stop hiding and the living start running from the truth? The days after Holloway blurred together in a storm of reports, interrogations, and whispered meetings. The base was sealed under the authority of Military Intelligence Division 7. Uniforms changed, badges vanished, and the air grew thick with secrets once more. Only now, the silence was official. Colonel Aacia River had been declassified, though not entirely. Her existence was still a rumor in most circles, her survival recorded in encrypted archives few could access. The world outside still believed she was dead. Inside, she was both legend and liability. She didn't mind. Legends could move in silence. A convoy of unmarked vehicles carried her away from Holloway 3 nights after the raid. No ceremony, no send-off, just a quiet departure under low clouds and a single escort aircraft overhead. Her orders were simple: debrief at Division 7 headquarters. But orders were never just orders. The building sat buried beneath the desert, hidden under miles of rock and reinforced concrete, a maze of corridors humming with classified energy. She was led through 3 checkpoints, her escorts silent, their uniforms unmarked. They didn't salute her. They didn't have to. When she finally entered the debriefing room, the silence hit like pressure. 1 table, 2 chairs, 1 light. And the man waiting inside. Director Emmerich, the head of Division 7. He didn't rise when she entered, just watched her, the way an analyst watches a data stream, detached, clinical. "Colonel River," he said finally, his voice smooth and practiced, "or would you prefer Mockingbird?" She sat opposite him. Names don't matter, results do. His lips twitched slightly, not quite a smile. "Indeed, and you've produced quite a result. 2 high-ranking officers detained, an entire weapons smuggling network compromised, 37 connected accounts frozen. You've done more damage to the black market in 8 months than 3 divisions managed in 3 years." There was a pause. But he continued, eyes narrowing, "You've also raised questions. Questions about oversight, about chain of command, about trust." Aacia leaned back slightly. "Trust isn't a word that survives in this job, Director." "Perhaps," he said, "but it's the word that keeps the machine running. Without it, we get what happened to you." The air between them cooled. He studied her for a long time. "Tell me, Colonel, do you regret it? Staying dead for 3 years, living as a ghost among the people you once commanded?" Asha's gaze didn't waver. "Regret doesn't change outcomes." "That's not an answer." She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars that crossed her knuckles like pale maps. "If I hadn't taken that assignment, 6 dead pilots would have died for nothing. So no, Director, I don't regret it, but I won't pretend it didn't cost me." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that. "Good, because it's not over." She knew before he said it. There was always a higher layer. "Operation Halcyon," he said, sliding a sealed dossier across the table. "What you uncovered at Holloway was one node in a larger network, a global one. The financial trails lead to private defense contractors, off-book research projects, and diplomatic channels we're not authorized to touch. She opened the file. Inside were photos, satellite images, intercepted messages, and a single emblem stamped on a crate, a stylized serpent wrapped around a wing. She knew that symbol. She'd seen it burned onto supply containers during her Phantom Squadron days, shipments labeled non-standard requisition, signed off by a ghost division that didn't officially exist. "This goes back to Midnight Sun," she said quietly. "Exactly," Emmerich replied. "The same players, the same pattern. You stopped them once. You exposed them again. But this time, Colonel, they know who you are, and they know you're alive." She closed the file. "Then they'll come." He studied her a moment longer, then stood. "We'll provide whatever support you require, but be careful who you trust. This kind of operation doesn't survive without help from the inside." She almost smiled, tired, ironic. "I'm good at pretending I trust people." "I know," he said softly. "That's what makes you dangerous." That night she stood on the observation deck above the base, staring out at the black desert horizon. The stars were clearer here, infinite, unblinking, brutally honest. In the reflection on the glass she almost saw them, her old squadron, the 6 who'd gone down in flames, their laughter, their pride, the last thing she'd heard before the fire swallowed their voices. She whispered their names under her breath, one by one like a prayer. "River to Phantom Lead, do you copy?" Only the wind answered. In the following weeks, the investigation deepened. Under Emmerich's direction, Aacia became the silent spearhead of the internal probe, tracing shipments, identifying cover identities, dismantling the shadow chain. Every night she found herself back in hangars, offices, and flight decks, the same places she'd once scrubbed as a cleaner. Only now, her presence commanded silence for different reasons. Some stared at her with awe, others with fear, most with guilt. A Bologna remained by her side, steady, sharp, loyal. Together, they pieced together fragments of encrypted communications and black budgets that pointed toward something larger than weapons smuggling. Artificial override systems, behavioral algorithms, flight AI programs that could override human input entirely. "Remote control of the pilot," a Bologna said, scanning the decrypted data, "not just the plane." Aacia nodded grimly. That's why Midnight Sun was buried. It wasn't about hardware, it was about control. They worked in silence for hours, the hum of servers and distant thunder the only sound. When Aacia finally looked up, her expression had hardened. "We're not chasing smugglers anymore. We're chasing the people trying to play God." Late one evening, she found herself walking the perimeter of the flight field, alone, the night wind sharp and clean against her face. The air smelled of rain and kerosene. She stopped beside the XF-72, her hand brushing its cool metal skin. It was strange how something so advanced, so lethal, could still feel like a friend. "Permission to speak freely, Colonel," a voice came from behind her. It was Thackeray, younger, restless, his eyes carrying that mix of admiration and unease people always wore around her. "Always," she said. He hesitated. "Do you ever wish it had gone differently, that you stayed dead?" She turned toward him, studying his face, sincere, uncertain, maybe even afraid. "Every mission takes something," she said softly. "Sometimes it's your life. Sometimes it's your peace. The trick is deciding which loss you can live with." He nodded slowly. "And if there's nothing left to lose?" "Then you fight anyway," she said, "because someone has to." Weeks passed. Piece by piece, the trail began to converge on a single name, Helix Dynamics, a multinational contractor specializing in autonomous combat systems. Officially, they developed navigation software. Off the record, they were building something else entirely, an experimental override network linking aircraft AI to encrypted satellites. a digital leash for human pilots. The same systems Blackwood and Lermer had been moving. The implications were staggering and terrifying. When Aacia brought the intel to Emmerich, he studied it with visible discomfort. "You understand what you're suggesting," he said. "If this is real, it implicates people above my clearance, maybe above command itself." "Then we take it above them," Aacia replied. His silence was answer enough. They both knew what that meant. Every command structure had its breaking point. Every truth had a cost. That night, Aacia couldn't sleep. The hum of air vents sounded like engines in the dark. The smell of oil in the corridors dragged her back to another hangar, another mission. She saw fire again, her squadron burning against the horizon, their voices cutting off mid-scream. She carried those ghosts for 3 years. Now she was about to face the men who had made them. But fear wasn't what she felt. It was something colder. Resolve. She sat at her desk and opened the worn photograph she still kept tucked in her uniform pocket. Her thumb traced the outlines of the 6 faces beside her, their smiles, their youth, their faith in her. "They think control means safety," she whispered, "but control is just another kind of weapon." The words lingered in the stillness like a vow. At dawn, the message came through. Encrypted, Priority 1. Target identified. Helix Dynamics holding covert demonstration in Geneva. Satellite override test scheduled within 72 hours. Objective: intercept, gather intel, prevent activation. She read it twice. Then she stood. 8 months pretending to be invisible had taught her something vital. Silence was not weakness. It was preparation. And she was done being quiet. How far can you run from the truth before it begins following you in silence? 3 weeks after Holloway, Colonel Aacia River was no longer listed on any active roster. Her name had disappeared again, struck from files, redacted from reports. To the outside world, she didn't exist. And for the mission ahead, that was exactly what she needed. The flight to Geneva was quiet, deliberately so. Aacia sat by the window of a civilian transport jet, dressed in plain clothes, her hair cut shorter, her posture relaxed but alert. The clouds below rolled like waves, white and endless. Across the aisle sat Captain Bologna, now posing as a logistics coordinator named Evelyn Dane. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed the tension. "Helix Dynamics is hosting a defense expo," Bologna murmured, pretending to scroll through a tablet. "The demonstration's disguised as a civilian tech event, but the guest list is selective. Intelligence directors, private contractors, even a few politicians with investment ties." Aacia nodded slightly, "And they'll be showcasing the override system." "That's what our intel says. They call it the Orpheus Network, supposed to enhance pilot safety by remote correction. But in the wrong hands. It becomes obedience," Aacia finished quietly, "not safety." Bologna hesitated. "Do you think Emmerich knows everything?" Asha's gaze didn't move from the window. "He knows enough to be afraid." The clouds parted, revealing the snow-capped Alps below, beautiful, detached, eternal. In that moment, Aacia thought about how war always found its way to beauty, how even mountains couldn't hide the things men built to destroy each other. They arrived under cover of a diplomatic delegation. New identities, new badges, new names. Inside the Helix Dynamics Convention Hall, glass and light stretched for hundreds of feet, clean, modern, sterile. Every detail spoke of power disguised as progress. The banners read, "Innovation is security. Autonomy is the future." Aacia moved through the crowd of suits and military uniforms, her every sense tuned to the rhythm of surveillance. Cameras in corners, silent drones drifting above the exhibition floor, guards pretending to be ushers. Bologna stayed close, murmuring updates into her concealed comm. 2 exits at the rear. Security grid overlaps on the west side. Server access likely in the restricted wing behind Hall C. Copy, Aacia replied softly. They stopped near the main stage where a presenter, sharp suit, rehearsed smile, introduced the Orpheus prototype. Behind him, a massive holographic display projected the image of a sleek unmanned fighter jet. This system, he declared, is designed to protect pilots from themselves. Split-second remote correction, instant override in case of disorientation, failure, or non-compliance, Aacia whispered under her breath. She wasn't listening to the speech anymore. She was watching the crowd. There near the far railing stood a man in a black coat wearing an unobtrusive earpiece. His posture was wrong for a delegate, too still, too alert. Helix security. And he wasn't watching the stage, he was watching her. A Bellona noticed, too. 3 on the floor, 1 near the exit, she murmured. They've clocked us. Aacia didn't move, her expression didn't change. Let them. Because sometimes being hunted made the hunter easier to find. As the demonstration concluded, applause filled the hall. The crowd began to disperse toward the adjoining networking lounges. Aacia and a Bellona split naturally, blending into different groups. She moved toward the west corridor, flashing her false credentials to a passing guard who didn't even look twice. The restricted area was quieter, fluorescent light buzzing above sterile white walls. Her heels clicked softly on the tile. She stopped at a secured door labeled Authorized Personnel Only and held her badge to the scanner. Access denied. She frowned slightly, then reached into her pocket and produced a thin metallic strip, a bypass tool, improvised from the kind of cleaning equipment she'd once carried daily. Old habits. Invisible tricks. The lock released with a soft tone. Inside was a server room, rows of cold, humming machines. The air smelled of ozone and secrets. She plugged in her encrypted drive and began downloading system data. Lines of code filled the portable screen, networks, IP routes, access signatures. But one string caught her eye. Midnight Sun, archive active user auth, director EMMERICH. Her pulse stopped for half a beat. No, that couldn't be. She scrolled again, the same tag repeated across multiple access logs. Emmerich's clearance. He wasn't just monitoring the Helix program, he was inside it. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Mockingbird to Nest, confirm authorization chain for Division 7 Director. No response. She tried again. Static. They'd cut her line. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. She killed the screen, pocketed the drive, and moved behind a cooling unit. 2 men entered, security agents in black tactical suits, moving with practiced caution. She's in the system, one muttered. Director said containment only, no mess. Containment. So that was it. Emmerich hadn't sent her to expose Helix. He'd sent her to retrieve their data, and then erase the evidence that could lead back to him. A setup. Another layer of betrayal. They passed within 2 meters of her hiding place. The moment the first man turned, she moved fast, silent. Her arm locked around his throat, pulling him backward. The struggle was brief, efficient, controlled. He dropped soundlessly to the floor. The second spun too late. Her knee caught his wrist. The gun fell. 2 strikes later, he joined his partner in unconscious silence. She stood over them, breathing steady. Her reflection in the glass panels looked unfamiliar, harder, colder, sharper. How many times would she have to become someone else just to survive the truth? A Bellona's voice came faintly through the backup channel. Colonel, where are you? They've sealed the exits. Helix security is running a full sweep. Get to the south loading bay, Aacia said. I'll meet you there. She moved fast through corridors, service tunnels, emergency stairwells. Every turn brought another memory of Holloway, of fire, of betrayal. Only this time, she wasn't running to hide. She was running to expose. She reached the loading bay seconds before the lockdown gates began to close. A Bologna was waiting, eyes wide, breath sharp. What the hell happened? Aacia handed her the drive. Proof. Helix isn't working alone. The director's embedded in the network. He's been covering their tracks for years. A Bologna stared. Emmerich. Yes, we were never supposed to make it out. The sound of approaching boots echoed down the hall. Go, Aacia ordered. Take the drive, secure it with Division 3. Tell no one else. What about you? I'll hold them off. A Bologna shook her head. No chance we leave together. For the first time in months, Aacia almost smiled. You were a good pilot, a Bologna. Don't make me order you now. A Bologna hesitated, then took the drive and disappeared through the side exit. Aacia turned back toward the corridor as the first of the Helix agents rounded the corner. Bullets sparked against the metal crates. She dove for cover, returning fire with precise, measured bursts. Her mind was calm, focused. Each shot another line in the story she refused to let die in silence. When her last magazine clicked empty, the bay was silent again. She bought a Bologna the time she needed. Aacia moved toward the emergency hatch, leading to the underground parking level. Outside, Geneva's night glowed with city light, indifferent, serene. No one would ever know that beneath its glass towers, a war was being fought for control of the human will itself. She escaped through the tunnels beneath the convention complex. Every echo of her boots sounded like a countdown. At street level, she blended into the crowd, just another face in the dark, just another ghost wearing someone else's name. Her comm crackled faintly, one final signal breaking through the interference. Mockingbird extraction team inbound. Confirm safe transfer of intel. She stopped under the flickering streetlight, rain beginning to fall in soft, relentless drops. A Bologna has it, she said quietly. The data's clean, but Division 7 is compromised. A pause then. Understood. Proceed to fallback point Bravo 13. You'll be briefed by command directly. She looked up at the sky, gray, wet, endless, and almost laughed. Briefed by command. The same command that had buried her once before. She turned and walked into the rain. Hours later, in a safe house overlooking Lake Geneva, Aacia sat by the window, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the water. She could still hear the echo of the presenter's voice. Autonomy is the future. Maybe he was right, but autonomy wasn't freedom. Not when control came disguised as protection. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn photograph of her squadron. Her thumb brushed across the faces one more time, a ritual, a reminder. They'll try again, she whispered. They always do. The rain continued, steady and soft, washing the glass clean. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a new storm was already gathering. And this time, she wasn't going to hide from it. How do you tell the difference between loyalty and control when both wear the same uniform? The safe house near Lake Geneva was quiet, too quiet. Colonel Aacia River had been awake for hours, staring at the static glow of the encrypted comms panel on the table. Rain had stopped outside, leaving the glass streaked with water like veins across a wound. She'd expected contact from a Bologna by now. A single coded phrase, a signal that the drive was secure, but nothing came. Only silence. And silence was never safe. She checked her watch. 4:30 hours. The city outside was still half asleep, early commuters and delivery vans breaking the stillness. Inside, the only sound was the soft tick of a wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. Then a soft ping from the comm device. Her eyes flicked to the screen. A single line of text appeared. Fallback point Bravo 13 compromised. Abort extraction. No sender ID. No encryption tag. She froze. That message wasn't from command. It was from someone inside Division 7. Someone trying to warn her. She shut down the system and moved, fast. Years of survival had taught her that hesitation got you killed. Within minutes, the safe house was stripped, laptop destroyed, data drives burned. She poured coffee grounds over the ashes, then scattered them into the sink. The first explosion hit before she made it to the door. It wasn't big, controlled, precise. A shaped charge meant to breach, not flatten, but it was close, too close. Aacia dove behind the kitchen counter as the blast blew through the entryway. The concussion wave rippled through the small apartment, shattering the lights, knocking over furniture. Boots, 3, maybe 4 men, moving with tactical rhythm. Not mercenaries, professionals. Her own. Division 7. The first man through didn't even have time to aim. Asha's round took him in the shoulder, spinning him into the doorframe. She rolled across the floor, seized his fallen rifle, and dropped the second before he could stabilize. The third advanced low and silent, a move she recognized from her own training. "You don't have to do this," she called out quietly. "Neither do you, Colonel," the man replied, his voice steady through the rebreather mask. "Orders are orders." "Whose?" she asked. He hesitated a second too long. That was her opening. She fired once, controlled burst, a warning shot to the ground that sent him diving sideways. She used the distraction to move, window, balcony, jump. Her boots hit pavement 3 stories down, pain ricocheting up her legs, but she kept running. Behind her, the safe house erupted in flames. By sunrise, she was gone, another ghost disappearing into the city's pulse. Geneva looked different in daylight, calm, civilized, clean. No one noticed the woman in a dark hooded coat moving through the market crowds, blood drying on her sleeve. No one noticed how her eyes never stopped scanning reflections, windows, cars, glass walls. Every surface became a mirror, every face a question. She ducked into a narrow alley and pressed her back against the wall, pulling out a small, encrypted handset. Static hissed for several seconds before a voice came through, low, cautious, familiar. "Mockingbird, it's Falcon." Falcon was her contingency contact, an independent intelligence liaison who owed her favors dating back to the Midnight Sun days. "You're late," he said. "Extraction compromised," she replied. "Division 7 sent a kill team." There was silence on the line, then quietly, "So it's true, they've turned inward. I need to know what's left of a Bologna." "She made contact," Falcon said, "but she's being tracked. Someone inside command flagged her clearance. She won't last long." Asha's jaw tightened. "Send me her coordinates." "You sure you want to walk back into the crosshairs?" "I never left them." Hours later, she was across the border, into France under a false passport, her movements buried under civilian traffic. Every checkpoint felt like a test, every glance a suspicion. By dusk, she reached an abandoned rail yard outside Lyon, the coordinates Falcon had sent. It was empty, quiet except for the wind whistling through broken glass. Then faint movement, a figure stepping from behind an overturned freight container. "Colonel," a Bologna said. She looked exhausted, mud on her boots, tear in her jacket, a bandage peeking through the sleeve. Asha approached carefully. "You're hurt." "Nothing fatal." A Bologna managed a faint smile. "You're harder to kill than your file suggests." Asha's lips curved. That's the benefit of being officially dead. But the humor didn't last. They both knew what this meeting meant. A Bologna reached into her pack and produced a data module, the same one Asha had handed her in Geneva. "I copied it. I knew they'd come after us." Asha took it, sliding it into a secure pocket. "Good thinking." They killed Lermer, Abelona said quietly. Prison transfer, vehicle accident. That's what command is calling it. Aacia didn't answer. She didn't need to. Emmerich made it look like he's cleaning up loose ends, Abelona continued. But he's covering his tracks. The Orpheus data links directly to his authorization keys. He's deeper in than we thought. He always was, Aacia said. They spent the next few hours in the shadows of the old depot, reviewing the data on a portable field screen. It was worse than either of them imagined. The Orpheus network wasn't just a prototype, it was operational. Pilots across multiple Allied bases had unknowingly been connected to test nodes for months, their flight telemetry rerouted through Helix-controlled servers. In essence, someone already had remote access to every aircraft in those sectors. Every pilot thought they were flying freely. They weren't. They can control everything, Abelona whispered. Every missile, every flight path, every heartbeat. Aacia stared at the screen, and no one even knows it's happening. The weight of that realization hit hard, not as shock, but as betrayal so familiar it almost felt numb. This is bigger than black market tech, she said softly. This is obedience by design. Night fell again. The city lights blinked on in the distance, like stars too tired to shine. Abelona dozed briefly, leaning against a wall, exhaustion overtaking her. Aacia sat watch, her sidearm resting across her knee, her eyes on the shadows. She thought of her old squadron again, of the night they'd been shot down, believing they were chasing smugglers, of how command had turned their deaths into a cover story. Now she understood why. They weren't silencing mistakes, they were silencing witnesses. Her hand tightened on the grip of her weapon. Sometimes, she whispered, the war isn't fought on battlefields. It's fought in silence between orders and conscience. By morning, Falcon made contact again. His voice came through the encrypted channel, urgent. You've been tagged, he said. Division 7 issued a red notice under your old clearance code. They've framed you for the Geneva breach. Expected, she replied. Where Emmerich now? Zurich, private Helix facility. Rumor is he's attending a secure demonstration final stage of Orpheus testing. If it goes through, the system goes live across Europe. How long? 36 hours. She looked at Abelona. Get ready, we're going to Zurich. They left Lyon before sunrise, traveling by freight transport, blending with industrial convoys. Each checkpoint was a gamble, but luck or fate or something quieter carried them through. By nightfall, Zurich's skyline shimmered ahead, glass, water and money hiding behind civility. From a hill overlooking the industrial district, they could see it, a fortified campus surrounded by electric fencing and drone patrols, the Helix Dynamics R&D facility. And at its center, a command tower pulsing with red security lights. That was where Emmerich would be. Aacia lowered her binoculars. No air access, no clear route in. Abelona checked her watch. We could try infiltration through the drainage system, crude but quiet. Aacia smiled faintly. You've been learning. They began planning their approach, mapping patrol schedules, thermal scans, security blind spots. Every detail mattered. But beneath her calm, Aacia felt something heavier stirring, not fear but inevitability. This was where every thread led. And she knew, deep down, that not everyone would walk away from Zurich. That night they made their move. The rain had returned, soaking the air in cold silver. They crawled through drainage tunnels, climbed rusted ladders, and emerged inside the perimeter fence, unseen beneath the watch of automated turrets. Each step brought them closer to the truth and to the end. From the shadows of a maintenance corridor, they could see the central control hub through a glass partition. Inside, Director Emmerich stood before a digital display, surrounded by Helix engineers and military observers. Gentlemen, he said, his voice amplified through the hall. The Orpheus network is ready. Once activated, we'll achieve what no government has: a unified defense grid free of human error. No disobedience, no hesitation, just pure efficiency. Aasha's whisper was a knife. He's not building defense, he's building submission. Bologna glanced at her. Then let's end it. They synchronized their watches. 1 minute. Aacia moved to the side entrance, disabling the lock with a bypass tool. The door hissed open just enough for them to slip through. They advanced silently through the server room, the hum of machinery masking their steps. At the central control console, Aacia connected a small override drive, a countermeasure she'd built years ago for Phantom Squadron, a last resort to crash hostile AI systems. Once I upload this, Orpheus collapses, she said, but so will every linked defense grid. We'll blind half the continent for an hour. Bologna nodded. Better blind than controlled. They exchanged a look, one of quiet understanding, the kind soldiers share before the storm. Do it, Bologna said. The upload began. Progress bar climbing slowly. 30%. 50. Then alarms. Security breach, someone shouted. Glass shattered as guards swarmed in from both entrances. Bologna turned, firing controlled bursts. Aacia crouched over the terminal, shielding the drive as rounds sparked off the consoles around her. 70%. 80. A shot tore through her shoulder. She staggered, caught herself on the desk. Bologna moved instantly, dragging her behind cover. You're hit. Keep them off me, Aacia gritted out. 95. 98. Then the screen flashed white. Upload complete. System override INITILIZED. All at once the lights died. The room plunged into darkness. Every console shut down. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that comes after something irreversible. Aacia pressed her hand against the wound, breathing through the pain. It's done, she said softly. Bologna helped her up. The red emergency lights flickered to life, painting the corridor in blood color. Far above them, the network collapsed, satellites blinking out, control feeds going dark. Orpheus was dead. But the cost was still rising. From somewhere in the smoke, Emmerich's voice cut through. You think this stops me, he shouted. You can't kill an idea, Colonel. Aacia turned toward the sound, her face calm, eyes steady. No, she said, but you can bury the men who tried to own it. What happens after you destroy the thing that was never supposed to exist? Smoke filled the corridors of the Helix Dynamics facility, thick, choking, alive with sparks and sirens. Every red light pulsed like a heartbeat gone wrong. Colonel Aacia River moved through it like a ghost, injured, bleeding but unbroken. Her right shoulder burned where the bullet had passed through, yet her grip on the weapon didn't falter. Behind her, Captain Bologna covered their flank, guiding her through the maze of shattered glass and flickering emergency panels. Extraction route, Bologna shouted over the alarms. South hangar, Aacia said, voice low but steady. There's a maintenance tunnel under the fuel bay. It'll take us clear. They turned a corner just as the ceiling gave way behind them, flames roaring through the hallway. The entire network was collapsing, not just the building, but everything it had controlled. Above them, satellite grids were going dark one by one, automated defense systems offline, drone fleets falling silent in midair. The machine was dying, and it was taking its creators with it. They burst through a sealed door into the hangar. The space was enormous, filled with wrecked prototypes, burning consoles, and overturned vehicles. The rain outside had turned into a storm, hammering against the shattered roof. Through the smoke, figures moved, Helix security agents still trying to secure data, unaware that their servers had already been erased. A Bologna crouched behind a crate, reloading. They're not retreating. They don't know it's over yet, Aacia said. She scanned the hangar, looking for movement near the south wall. A section of the floor had already buckled, exposing the tunnel access below. There, she pointed, we get to that hatch, we're clear. But as they started forward, a voice echoed from across the hangar. Don't move. Aacia turned slowly. Director Emmerich stood on the upper platform, surrounded by armed guards. His suit was torn, his expression calm, too calm. Even now, with fire and ruin around him, he looked like a man delivering a lecture. I have to admit, he said, his voice carrying through the chaos, you've exceeded my expectations. Most people die when they go off script. Aacia didn't answer. Her weapon stayed leveled. You've killed the network, he continued. But you haven't stopped the idea. Control isn't a system, it's a belief. And belief doesn't die in fire. You built a machine that erased choice, she said quietly. That's not belief. That's fear wearing logic's mask. Emmerich almost smiled. And yet here you are, Colonel, the perfect soldier who couldn't follow an order. You call it conscience. I call it instability. A Bologna's patience snapped. You call murder efficiency. Emmerich looked down at her, then back to Aacia. You've corrupted her, just like you corrupted every system you touched. Phantom Squadron, Holloway, even this. Aacia felt the weight of his words, but she didn't flinch. You trained me to see threats. I just finally saw the right one. His jaw tightened. You think destroying Orpheus changes anything? We'll rebuild, smarter, hidden deeper. You've only delayed the inevitable. Asha's tone was quiet, almost gentle. Then I'll keep delaying it. The gunfire started again, sudden, sharp, violent. A Bologna dragged Aacia behind a wrecked vehicle as bullets shredded the crates around them. She returned fire, taking down one of the guards on the platform. To left, a Bologna shouted. Aacia moved to flank them, despite the pain tearing through her shoulder. Her vision blurred, but her focus remained razor-sharp. She waited for the rhythm of their fire, the brief pause between volleys, then moved. 2 shots, 2 clean hits. Silence returned, except for the crackle of burning metal. When the smoke cleared, Emmerich was gone. Where? A Bologna started, but then saw the side door closing behind the upper platform. Aacia didn't hesitate. He's heading for the launch bay. They pursued him through the collapsing corridors. Sparks rained from ruptured conduits. Every alarm screamed the same message: facility failure imminent. When they reached the launch bay, the scene hit like déjà vu. A small VTOL aircraft sat on the platform, engines warming, rain and fire mixing in the air. Emmerich stood beside it, typing furiously into a handheld terminal. You don't learn, do you? Aacia called out. He turned slowly. You don't understand. You think this is about control, but it's about survival. The world is unstable. People make mistakes. Machines don't. Aacia stepped closer. Machines also don't feel guilt, or compassion, or choice. That's what keeps us human. And look where humanity has gotten us, he snapped. War, corruption, collapse. Orpheus was order. Without it, everything falls apart. Then let it, she said, because control without conscience isn't order, it's slavery. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time the mask cracked. Beneath the composure she saw it, fear. Fear not of death, but of irrelevance. You could have been part of it, he said. You could have led it. I already lead something, she said. Myself. She raised her weapon. Emmerich's fingers twitched toward the detonator clipped to his vest. A Bologna shouted, Aacia. Gunfire flashed brief, final. Emmerich fell backward, the detonator clattering across the floor. His body hit the platform edge and disappeared into the inferno below. The blast that followed wasn't massive, but it was enough. The shockwave ripped through the bay, throwing both women to the ground. A Bologna was the first to move, coughing through the smoke. We have to go. Aacia tried to stand but stumbled. Her wound had opened again, blood soaking through her sleeve. A Bologna grabbed her, slinging her arm over her shoulder. Together they staggered toward the tunnel hatch. The metal floor groaned beneath them. Each step another promise that the whole structure wouldn't last much longer. They reached the hatch and dropped into the tunnel just as the platform above collapsed. Darkness swallowed them. For what felt like hours, they moved through the underground passage, guided only by flickering emergency lights and the sound of distant fire. Finally, they emerged outside the perimeter, into the cold rain of early morning. The city skyline burned faintly in the distance, the Helix Tower a pillar of smoke. They stopped near a ridge overlooking the facility. "It's over," a Bologna said, half in disbelief. Aacia lowered herself to the ground, exhaustion overtaking her. For now. A Bologna looked at her, at the blood, the dirt, the silence in her eyes. "You should be in a hospital." Aacia shook her head. "Hospitals ask questions." "Then what now?" She looked out over the horizon. "We disappear. Let command bury what's left of this mess. Someone will dig it up again one day, and maybe then someone else will be ready." They sat there in silence for a long time. Two soldiers watching the world they'd saved quietly pretend it hadn't needed saving. Eventually, a Bologna spoke. "You think they'll come for us?" Aacia smiled faintly. "They already have." She reached into her jacket and pulled out the small, battered photograph, the one she'd carried since Phantom Squadron. The rain smeared the edges, blurring the faces. "They were my first ghosts," she said softly. "Now there are more, but at least this time the right people will haunt them." A Bologna didn't respond. She just watched the horizon, the smoke thinning, the light slowly breaking through the clouds. A faint warmth touched the edge of the sky. Dawn. Hours later, as the sun climbed higher, Falcon's voice came through the emergency comm channel. "Mockingbird confirms survival. The network's dead. Satellite feeds confirm total collapse." Aacia pressed the transmitter weakly. "Alive, barely." "You did it. Europe's defense AI chain is offline. Emmerich's files are being scrubbed from every archive. Officially, this never happened." Aacia exhaled a small laugh. "Story of my life. Extraction teams can be there in 2 hours. "Negative," she said. "No teams, we vanish. Let the system heal without ghosts in the way." There was silence on the line, then Falcon's quiet reply. "You'll never stop running, you know." "I'm not running," she said softly. "I'm remembering." She shut off the comm and leaned back against the rocks. The pain in her shoulder throbbed, but she didn't fight it. Pain was proof she was still here, proof she'd chosen something real. A Bologna sat beside her, her head tilted toward the sky. "What if they rebuild it again?" "They will," Aacia said. "Different name, same idea, that's how people are." "So what's the point?" Aacia looked at her, eyes steady, voice low. "The point is that someone always has to say no, even if nobody listens, even if it changes nothing." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and burning metal. "Then what are we now?" a Bologna asked. Asha's answer came after a long silence. "Free." The storm finally broke, sunlight cutting through the clouds in fragile bands. The air smelled clean again, new, almost forgiving. For the first time in years, Aacia felt something she couldn't name. Not peace. Not victory. Just release. The ghosts of her squadron seemed quieter, the weight in her chest lighter. She closed her eyes, letting the rain wash the soot from her hands. Somewhere behind her, a Bologna whispered, "You ever miss who you were before all this?" Aacia opened her eyes. Every day, but she died a long time ago. The woman who walked out of Holloway, she was someone else. A Bologna looked at her, "And who's standing here now?" Aacia smiled faintly. "Someone who finally stopped cleaning up other people's messes." In the distance, sirens wailed faint, far away, like memories trying to reach them too late. The city would rebuild, the files would vanish, the truth would fade into rumor. But somewhere deep inside a buried archive, a single line of code would remain uncorrupted. Mockingbird last active transmission, Zurich, status, unknown. And that was enough. How do you live after the noise ends, when the war keeps breathing inside you? 3 months after Zurich, Europe looked the same. Cities rebuilt. Governments issued statements. The world pretended it hadn't come within a whisper of surrendering its will to a machine. The papers called it a data collapse, a system malfunction, a technical anomaly. But Aacia River knew better. She lived now in a small village on the northern coast, a place so quiet even the ocean seemed to move more slowly. A rented house, plain and wind-worn. No rank, no uniform. Just a woman who rose with the tide and disappeared with the dusk. To her neighbors, she was Anna Rivers, a translator for an NGO that never called. She kept to herself. Every morning she walked the cliffs with a mug of coffee, watching the water shift between steel and silver. The world no longer needed a ghost. It needed a witness. Sometimes in the early hours, she'd hear the hum of aircraft overhead. Instinct made her look up every time, counting the beats between sound and silence, identifying the engines by memory. But now the sky was cleaner. No unmarked drones. No invisible eyes tracking her. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like exile. She still kept one reminder, the photograph. The edges had frayed, the image fading, but the faces remained. 6 young pilots, a younger version of herself in the middle. Sometimes she'd lay it flat on the table, trace each face and whisper, still flying. They were. In memory, in warning, in the quiet discipline that had carried her through every fire. A Bologna visited once, briefly, quietly. She'd found work training rescue pilots for humanitarian missions. Her eyes had changed, less defiant, more patient. They sat on the porch, the wind sharp and cold, neither speaking for a long time. When a Bologna finally broke the silence, her voice was soft. "You ever think we did the wrong thing?" Aacia didn't look up. Define wrong. "We shut down a system that could have stopped wars." Aacia turned to her, calm, steady. "It could have stopped choice. There's no peace in obedience." A Bologna nodded slowly. "Still, sometimes I wonder if anyone even knows what we did." "They don't have to." "Doesn't that bother you?" Aacia smiled faintly. "It used to. Now I think maybe the world works better when some victories stay invisible." They sat there until the light faded, saying nothing else. When a Bologna left the next morning, she didn't say goodbye. Some bonds didn't need words to stay alive. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The wound in her shoulder healed into a pale scar, a line that caught the light like an old truth refusing to fade. Every day felt both borrowed and earned. She took small jobs when she had to, fixing radios, translating field reports, helping fishermen recalibrate navigation systems. Simple work, honest work. It wasn't redemption. It was rhythm. And rhythm, she'd learned, was what kept ghosts from waking too loudly. One evening, as the sun sank into the sea, a letter arrived. No return address, no insignia. Just a single wax seal, the symbol of Division 3. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short message, handwritten. "The world believes Emmerich died in Zurich, but the network fragments weren't all destroyed. Someone's rebuilding. We could use your help. If you choose." At the bottom, Falcon. She read it twice. Then she folded the page neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and set it beside the window. The sea wind lifted it slightly, as if urging her to decide. She didn't. Not yet. That night she sat outside under the stars, a sky so clear it felt like memory itself. The world above was silent again, finally free of circuits and commands. She thought about what Falcon had written, about what it meant to choose. For most of her life, choice had been the illusion others offered her, between orders and loyalty, between silence and survival. But now she understood, real choice wasn't about missions or sides. It was about the moment you decided what kind of person you wanted to be when no one was watching. The next morning, she packed a small bag, not weapons, not gear, just essentials. A notebook, a pen, the photograph, a small compass that no longer pointed north. She placed the letter inside the notebook and walked to the edge of the cliffs. The ocean stretched endlessly below, the air cold enough to taste. She dropped the compass into the waves, watched it vanish beneath the foam. Then she whispered, "I'll find my own direction." She stayed in the village a few more days, tying loose ends, leaving no traces. The locals would remember her as quiet, kind, distant, a woman who listened more than she spoke. When she finally left, she took the long road south, through fields and fog, her coat pulled tight against the wind. The road led nowhere specific, and that was the point. Every mile felt like a confession, whispered to the earth. Every step, a soft apology to the ghost she carried. She wasn't running anymore. She was walking towards something she didn't need to name. Weeks later, in a small border town, she stopped in a cafe. The television behind the counter showed a news report, a government hearing about cyber defense ethics. Politicians argued, experts speculated. The words autonomous control systems flashed across the screen. Aacia sipped her coffee. The world kept turning, still trying to control what it couldn't understand. She left a few coins on the table and walked out into the rain. As she crossed the bridge out of town, her comm device buzzed softly, a signal she hadn't heard in months. She paused, pulling it from her pocket. The display glowed faintly. Unknown source/ENCRYPTED call. She hesitated, then answered. Mockingbird, a voice said, calm, quiet, familiar. She froze, a Bologna. Falcon gone dark, the voice replied. They're moving faster than we thought. Helix remnants, new funding, same goal. Aacia looked out at the river below, rain blurring its reflection. Then it begins again. Are you in? A long pause. Then I'm never out. The line clicked dead. That night she boarded a midnight train heading east. No destination, no papers, just the rhythm of steel and time. Outside the window, cities flickered by, each one a memory she'd never had time to live. Inside, she leaned back in her seat, the photograph resting in her lap. For the first time, she noticed something she'd never seen before in the reflection of the glass, her own face beside theirs. Not haunted, not hiding. Just whole. The train cut through the night, a single line of light threading across the dark. She closed her eyes and listened to its steady rhythm, the sound of movement, of persistence. Maybe that was all life really was. Not victory, not survival. Just the courage to keep moving when everything tells you to stop. And for the first time, she felt no need to outrun her past. It had already become her compass. The story of Colonel Aacia River would never reach the news. Her name would never appear in reports or documentaries. But somewhere, in the classified archives of people who remembered the cost of control, her file would remain. A single note attached to it in handwriting barely legible. Integrity is quiet. Dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She opened her notebook and wrote one final line beneath Falcon's message. If control is the absence of choice, then freedom is the courage to choose again and again, even when it hurts. She closed the notebook, exhaled slowly, and looked out at the faint horizon, where dawn met the edge of the rails. And somewhere beyond that horizon, a new story was waiting to be written. Not of ghosts, not of machines, but of the human heart still flawed, still fragile, still free.